remember the name Matt Lindland? One of the great competitors ever. Founder of Team Quest, right there with Dan and Randy, ranked number 1 in the world, all these wonderful things, an Olympic medalist, and so on and so forth. But I was with Matt Lindland in Canada. And in Vancouver, Canada, there are more Starbucks. And I'm from the Northwest where they created Starbucks. There are more in Canada. It's almost laughable. There's even one really busy intersection, where a 4-way stop. There's one on each corner. And at any rate, one thing they don't do there, and I couldn't tell you why, but they do not put the lid on for you. They have lids, but over where the cream and the sweeteners are, is also where the lids are, and you have to put it on yourself. So we order our coffee. It's on the counter, and Matt is standing at it. And I know what he's thinking because I know him well. He won't pick it up. He's angry. He is perplexed. Frankly, I was also wondering where the lids are, but he actually calls one of them over to get the coffee because there's no lid. The lids are over here, and it flusters him to a level. And so then he puts the lid on, and then he goes to take a drink, and the lid wasn't on right, so it spills, and it gets on him, it's over the counter. But in the process, the half a second it took where he turned and spilled and then turns back, they'd made a switch, but he didn't see the switch. One girl went out, and a different girl came in. So he begins to reprimand the new girl, which is not the original girl who he asked to put on the list place. I tell you this whole story for the punchline, and the punchline is simply this. He says to them, I should not be doing this. I am not like you. I am not trained.
I am not a lid expert.
He didn't have the proper training. That whole story was so that I could say that he thought that there was like a school you went to or something for lid application.
I am not a barista. I do not have my certification. I'll tell you, speaking of Matt Lindland, just to rewind a little bit, just rewind the clock, the coffee, from what I understand, all respect to Matt, couldn't have made him smell any worse. From what I understand.
Why is that?
Wasn't that a weapon he used in the cage?
He learned it. He learned it in Europe. Yes. He learned it in Europe and he used it as a weapon, but it went even further, which is the European guys who somehow he decided he admired would after practice, they'd get in the shower dressed. And then while in the shower, they would kind of take their clothes off. But then that meant that the clothes also got washed. So they kind of wring them out and they would go hang it up in their locker. So when you got back, it would be musty and mildew and it would smell terrible. So now it was also a weapon in practice. Well, in practice, you don't want weapons. Your teammates. So he would show up to practice smelling like what Rampage Jackson referred to as 2 weeks. And that's not when he was trying to be aggressive. So just imagine the actual match. Yes, he used that as a weapon.
Dude, I'll never forget. He fought Rampage. And I don't know what made me remember this line, but I can do it almost verbatim. He finishes the fight. And Rampage says, just like this, because he's so funny, Rampage. And he looks over and he goes, you need to take a shower, partner.
Well, Mike, you got to understand from my perspective, I was in Matt's corner that night. I was his number one training partner, but I was also a corner man. We were so glad that Rampage told him, and we were hoping that he listened. Like, this is what we need, right? Jerry sometimes needed Kramer to come in and tell the girl to quit wearing that shirt. Like, we really needed that, but you know what? It didn't catch on. Matt did not do anything with that information from Rampage.
He took it in and he just said, no, thank you. No, thank you. I'm not going to shower, but thank you for the, yeah. He showers now, right? That he's retired, I would imagine.
I saw him over the weekend. He was at a wrestling tournament yesterday. It was actually at Matt's alma mater, Clackamas Community College, where he was a national champion before he went on to Olympic fame. And he was there. I think he had a couple of kids. He's coaches some wrestling now. My own son was wrestling in it. And I only got to the part where I got to say hello to him. But yeah, he actually smelled perfectly nice.
Fantastic. Buddy, listen, we got to talk about something.
What do you want to do?
Buddy, I took a beating on Saturday night. I'm pretty sure I picked every wrong fight.
There was a gentleman with ESPN who I watched the fight with, and ESPN has started a very big gambling show, which for the Walt Disney Company was a massive decision and undertaking.
Sure.
And he would have been 100%, except the 4 fights that were met with tremendous controversy by the public over what the judges did all went against him. So he was upset from that perspective, which I never really thought of the algorithm. And he's saying, now I'm batting 600. I was or 60%. I was 100%. until that happened. And so there was some very bizarre calls. I was cheering for Pena. I have a relationship with Pena. I just simply haven't met Raquel. And I thought I was pretty clear about my bias, but she did not win that fight when the judges gave it to her. But she simply didn't win that fight. It was 3-2, and it wasn't like hard to see. It was very clear. And I only bring that to you because, you know, maybe we're getting our feet just a little bit wet. One that we did predict is that Rountree would win. And overall, if you're betting on that, that's yes or no, and this was a no. However, we were the only two that were right that he could. We were the only two that were right as he can stand and trade. He is fast enough. He is accurate enough. Turned out his conditioning faded a little bit, but that's going to happen in championship rounds. If that fight was 3 rounds like everybody else is on the card that night, I mean, not for nothing, we weren't totally wrong about the competitive ability of Rountree. And I thought that Rountree, possibly even more than Alex, in terms of stock rising, who gained more fans, who got more of a wow, you're one of the top guys moment. I really think that Rountree stole the evening.
Yeah, I do too. And, you know, we talked about altitude, right? We talked about that before. Payton got there, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time. And I think Rountree got there a week ahead of time. And with all that muscle mass, it's just, you know, but again, you know, you got to look at it. He's got to get there. He's got to pay for the stuff. He's got his team with him. It's not as easy. Payton's got to, you know, he's probably making a lot more money. They didn't release, or maybe they have released the purse, but I'm sure that Payton made 5-6 times what he made. But he was competitive. That post-fight interview with the blood clot coming out of the nose, he gave everything. He was kind to the fans. He is a positive thinker. He gained a lot of fans, including Dana White. But do you think, in all honesty, that it was super competitive at any point? Where was the most danger Payton was in?
Yeah, that's a great point. And there was some kind of a position where he was hit as he was kind of like turning, and it almost set him, and a knee went down, and he popped right back up. And I only say that because I think that was the moment. And even with that said, I'm not certain he didn't slip. I'm not certain that he didn't slip the way that he went down. One thing about from the beginning of this sport, and I'm literally going back to Royce Gracie in 1993, but it was true then, and it's been true until Saturday. If you are on your feet and it is not going your way, you take it to the ground. If you fail and you can't get it to the ground, but you try. If you're on the ground and you're a constant threat, you try to keep that fight on your feet. Payton is the first that I have seen where it wasn't going his way. And in his next round, he returned to the same realm, walked him down, stood in the same spot, held his hands the same so that he could be attacked the same. It didn't go well. And in round 3, he returned to the same spot. He never even thought about stopping believing himself, getting away from his best skill sets, turning to something else. It never even crossed his mind. And things got a little bit better in 3, and then you saw that tide turn, which I think largely had to do with conditioning. And conditioning can be affected not just with the altitude or the way you prepare. You've ultimately got your DNA in there. But one thing that will make a guy fall apart, that will cause him from mentally falling apart and then cause his body to exhaust, is when you hit something as hard as you can hit and it doesn't go down. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even take a step backwards. When you do that, the things that can go through your mind, Conor had lost his first fight with Nate Diaz. And the big problem in that fight up at 170 pounds is Conor landed the same shot that had put everybody else down. But on somebody as big as a 170-pounder for the first time, Nate could take the shot. And that is really what made Conor fall apart. Hey, if I'm hitting you with my absolute best stuff, I know later tonight, as I fatigue, it won't be as hard as it is now. And you're taking it now. And it just can really make you unravel. And I think Rountree really did a number of things very well. But one thing that broke him, that started to work against him, that Pierre capitalized on, was Pierre constantly showing him, no matter what you do, you're not going to hurt me and I'm not going to go away.
It's so funny that you say that, because that's the one reoccurring nightmare I have. Swear to God, I'm hitting somebody and they're doing nothing. Like, that is a real nightmare that I've had repeatedly. It's just a weird feeling, especially when you're someone like Khalil Rountree with that missile for a left hand. What I saw, and again, not a fighter, not even a fight analyst, expert in any way, but it felt like Poatan was so well prepared for Rountree that he was going with the punch. Like that lean back, which they tell you really not to do, right? You're supposed to move left, right, and that to avoid. But he kind of just leaned back, and I never really saw him get hit square, at least with that left. I didn't catch it if it happened. I never had a moment of, yes, there it is. That's Khalil's thing. And yeah, I think it started to mess with Khalil, and then the conditioning, right, which we spoke about. And it just was a really bad night for him after that. He was a mess.
Mark Goddard had told Dana White, if you saw it, that was very powerful. But Mark Goddard said, I have been doing this for 20 years, and I have never, he's in there, he's the referee. I have never heard my ear, the sensation within my ears of the sound that it makes when Alex hits somebody. At heavyweight, any way you want to do it, I've never heard impact. And I got to tell you, Sos, things started to go more Alex's way, then they went extremely his way. But when you then saw the face of Khalil Rountree, that was really where I could kind of tie Goddard's statement in with an actual visual of, yeah, he didn't get hit that many times. Daniel Cormier had supplied a photograph. Khalil had done a movie. And in the movie, I don't know what happened, but he was hurt. It could have been a car accident for all I know, a beating, but they used all the effects of Hollywood makeup to make him look very, very beaten. They compared the Hollywood makeup to the actual beating, and they were not even close. And I think that just speaks to the damage that Pereira can do, man. It's something special.
I think Mark Goddard used the word, I don't want to misquote him, but I think he said it's ungodly.
Yes.
He said it's ungodly. What a word to choose, right? This is one of the best refs in the business, if not the best maybe right now. He's really a great, smart guy. He sees he's pro fighter. We talked about him crying after the fight where Kelvin Gastelum fought Israel, and he had never seen anybody put that much of themselves out there and be that deep, in such deep water. So he's a very sensitive ref. He's very sensitive to the fighters. And for him to use a word like ungodly, it must be something to be standing that close. And this guy, look, everybody's talking about Poatan and, he hasn't faced an elite wrestler, which is true. Now he's going to face Ankalaev. Everybody's assuming, by the way, Ankalaev is just going to walk through Rakic. I don't think that's true. I think Rakic is great, but I do think he'll win. If he does, Chael, how much of a threat does Ankalaev pose in the wrestling? Because he's not Daniel Cormier. He's not Khabib. He doesn't have that kind of crazy pressure like Marab and these guys. Where does he, or is he just good enough for sure to really challenge that part of Poatan's game?
And I'm also curious, I can only tell you this, the narrative is wrong. By example, if you were to ask Ankalaev what you do, he will tell you kickboxing. That's how he identifies. That's what he started with. He did not have wrestling matches as he was growing up. He was around those guys, much like Khabib. And Khabib's father had started an overall martial arts gym, even though he personally liked Sambo and Judo. It was MMA, and that's what Islam Makhachev, for example. And Ankalaev came through that same process, but before he got there, and he didn't start till he was 17. He didn't start as like a 9 and 10-year-old boy. He came in at 17, and up until 17, he had done kickboxing. So I only tell you, like first off, it's not quite like Izzy taking on Yoel Romero that was the Olympic medalist, or to your point, Daniel Cormier. It's a guy that's really good with the wrestling, but he's not a wrestler. That narrative is just false. Secondly, while Ankalaev appears to be the boogie monster, and there's even a Danish trying to keep them apart, they do have a common opponent, and that's Jan Blachowicz. Alex beat Jan. Ankalaev did not beat Jan. So, head-to-head competition is number one, but anywhere in the world, similar opponent becomes number two. So, for the evidence that we have, we've got to tip the scale towards Pereira, but DraftKings is not, and Vegas is not. And Vegas has Pereira to beat everybody you could possibly think of, every way you could think of, except Ankalaev. He's a 2-1 dog in a mythical matchup. I think that needs revised. I think they're not aware that it's kickboxer versus kickboxer.
Who's the elite wrestler at 205 right now? If you look back, you remember there was tons of them. It was the boogeyman, weight class back in the day, right? In the heyday, the Chuck Liddells and all that. But who's out there right now? Who's there? Can you think of anybody that's just a straight wrestler, a Cormier-style wrestler?
It's the first time. It's the first time in what we call the modern era, and the same thing is true at heavyweight, where there is not a single Division I All-American. There is not a single Olympian or world team, and that's from any country, that's even signed. Are you ready for that? The highest wrestler, highest achievement at heavyweight, I've got to go to that class, but is Stipe, who was very good, by the way, but there was no medals or All-American type things. Jon Jones achieved some good levels in the junior college, so maybe I'm being a little snotty about that. I don't mean to, but for the first time in history, light heavyweight and heavyweight is unrepresented by wrestling. I don't know the reason for that. I don't know if more or less wrestlers are putting their names in, but for the first time, we do not have a Yoel Romero, a Randy Couture, a Mark Coleman, somebody that you can actually look to that had that good wrestling pedigree. And it is a problem, because I know your point. Your point is of all the great things that Pereira has done and demonstrated, he has not demonstrated or done an ability to stay on his feet against an elite wrestler. And I agree, but in his defense, there just isn't one there right now.
It's almost like this guy has been created. I look at my work and I go, you create a character and you try to create a hero, and then you build around that hero all the necessary components to make them heroic. And if you look at Pereira, his personality is really starting to come through, and the guy doesn't even speak English, right? He's got Polinio, I don't know the guy's name, his main guy, the big guy, translating, but he's witty. I don't know if you've ever seen his videos with Nina Drama. He's funny. He's likable. Chael, he did a thing in Embedded where he had a hockey player for the Utah team, and one of the female fighters might have been Pena, and they were facing off. So they were like doing a fake face off. And he was like watching. So Poatan is behind them as if he was Dana White. And he looks at both, and then he goes, okay, guys. Like that, because Dana always says, okay, guys, good luck on Saturday, whatever. The entire room cracked up. And I'm at home watching this like it was a spit out my milk moment. He is likable. But when it comes to fight day and the weigh-in with the war paint, so he's got the badass stuff, but he's relatable, right? He doesn't have the braggart thing that Conor has. So people don't have that hate factor, which a lot of times works in your favor, right? But like this guy is hitting every button right. And then to your point, in the division he's in, there's no real threats, no real major threats. And he's just walking through people, or at least, he didn't walk through Rountree. I shouldn't say that, but he's winning decisively. I think he's had three title defenses in 7 months. That's unbelievable. He's super active. People love an active fighter. Dana loves an active fighter. This guy is the hero that we didn't even know we were going to get. And he is taking over the sport. I contend that he might be the biggest thing in MMA right now. Would you agree with that?
Yes, he is. Conor McGregor is not licensed right now. Sean O'Malley is injured right now. There is not a debate. And the only debate we had in the absence of Conor's license was between O'Malley and Pereira, and they were really battering out for box offices. And O'Malley had a little bit of an edge on him. But to your point, Pereira's already done 3 fights this year, which, by the way, has got an entire quarter still left if we wanted to do it on the way out the door, Pereira. Because I just so agree with what you're saying of total package. Mike, it's not just in our sport that we've never seen something like this. I will go further and correct me if I'm wrong, but sport. I've never seen somebody come into sport and take over a new thing at an older age. And I know there's a lot of people who go, well, it's not really new. He was in combat with kickboxing. It's completely new. We got Olympic champions in judo. We got Olympic champions in wrestling. They don't just come over anymore. Michael Jordan, maybe the best athlete ever, comes over from basketball to baseball. He did just fine. He did not become the best in the world. He did not become the best world by a wide margin. He did not become the best in the world by a wide margin at 36 years old. The guy's had 12 matches, Mike. That makes him the least experienced guy on the card. That is an amateur record. 10-2, that's what amateurs have. He's had the least fights, the least rounds, the least minutes of anyone on that card, and he's the leader of the bunch on his way out the door. And I had to catch this on the internet after the fact. He's leaving the cage, so everything dies down. He's the last one to get out. He's got to do his photos, and also he's on his way out. The cameras are off. He stops. There's thousands of people right here. The tunnel's down here. He's got to get. There's thousands of people and he begins to lead them where he's yelling, that word he uses, chama. He yells chama. They yell chama. He yells chama, chama. They yell chama, chama. But to see audience engagement after the fact, if you can get engagement at all, you're talking about The Rock. You're talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin. To get the audience to participate is the biggest moneymaker a promoter could ever hope for, but a promoter would never expect it because it cannot be done. He got it done. He got it done on the way out that nobody even knew about, including myself, had I not caught this by somebody's iPhone. I mean, I'm just saying, this is the consummate professional. He is showing up to weigh-ins in costume. He's got a gimmick. He's coming to the ring and he's doing that thing that gives you and I the goosebumps. But these are big things when you're trying to tell a story and get somebody over. All promotion is storytelling. The bigger fights have the better story. That's what it is. And this guy gives you a little bit of everything.
He really does. And he does it without being a jerk. And he doesn't play the heel. And he's so scary looking. But then when he's not in his fight mode, he's just a really likable human being. That is just really hard to do, especially with the language barrier, right? And he's using this word shama. I don't know what it means, but I'll be ironing my shirt and just out of nowhere, I'll go shama. It's like, what is happening to me? Am I a groupie of this fighter? What is going on? My wife's like, what? And she speaks Thai. English is her thing. And I'm walking around the house saying shama. And by the way, do you know what it means? It just means life force. We don't know.
No, okay. All I can tell you is what he said. And it was through an interpreter in a native lung after a fight. But it was essentially, you can apply it to anything. When I grew up, there was a cartoon called Smurfs. And you could have a Smurf of water, or you could have a Smurf more of temperature, or you could have a Smurf of tiredness. It was anything. But he also said that same thing. He goes, well, you might be going to training, you're excited to go, and you could say shama when it's time to train. Or you could be going to training, and you don't want to be there that day because you're tired, so you say shama. And so basically, you could apply it to anything. I guess that's how I interpreted that. But I do the same thing. I mean, as kids, I remember going on Santa Claus's lap and telling him I want a cape with wires in it so I can fly like Superman, because somewhere my sister who was older told me that it has wires. And at any rate, so, but that's normal. And then you even had the bad side of that where kids would go and they would jump out of a window thinking they were going to fly like Superman. But so to your point, to get adults, to inspire adults, to make adults think that guy's cool. Now, we do that as kids and we do that in high school, but when we grow up, we don't really go, that guy's cool very often. I'm with you. I watch what he does. I also find him to be cool. And that's just not a word that we as men get to use very often.
Not for another dude. We'll go, yeah, he's a good fighter. I like him, blah, blah. And you always have that sort of bravado. But this guy is just breaking down all of our defenses. And the shama thing, it reminds me of, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Donnie Brasco.
Oh, of course.
Okay. So Donnie Brasco, there's a brilliant scene because it's just so well written and it's such a good movie. There's a great scene where they go, hey, by the way, the Fed says to Donnie, what does forget about it mean? And Donnie goes, that means a lot. He goes, I mean, you could say something like, forget about it. That pasta is unbelievable. Or it could also mean go screw yourself. Forget about it. It can mean friendly. It can mean not friendly. It can mean you're happy. It can mean you're excited. And shama has the same thing. So I'm going with that. I don't even want to know what the literal translation is. We're going with that. I saw something that also speaks to his character, but I don't know that it's the greatest idea for him, for Poatan. He recently said that he's going to stay at 205 because he wants to give his buddy Sean Strickland a chance to rise and get the belt get his belt back at 185. What are your thoughts on that? Like friends over fights?
And one of my first thoughts, by the way, is you do not miss anything. I've actually been blown away at all these things that are not even on the show, and you got to go to the internet that you've gotten a hold of. I was there, so I should know these things, but great job. So now, okay. And that is very interesting. What's next it's the number one thing we always want to know in the sport. Hey, what's next? What's next? Even more than what happened. And I share that because it seems like Alex has three options, all of which are good. One, stay right where he is. Take on the number one contender. It's like, okay, that seems to be right in theme with what the UFC likes to do. Two, go up a weight class to a interim champion named Tom Aspinall, who does not currently have an opponent. That would be a very easy one to sign, particularly since Tom is already retained for the Garden in 2 months and does not have an opponent. All right, number 3, what you're talking about. Take him up on his offer to go down and challenge Dricus du Plessis. Now, I have never met Payton. However, Anthony Smith and Daniel Cormier both worked with him this past week, and they both said, Chael, I thought it was talk when he said it. But when you look at him and say he can't make 85 again because he's so big, what you're really talking about is he's not going to want to. He doesn't have the focus. He can't cannibalize and starve long enough to do it. He goes, he actually enjoys those things. If you give him a proposition of self-torture, for him, that's an attraction to it. And they said after visiting with him, he very much would go down. What he doesn't want to do is take the shot from Sean. And my understanding all along was, no, it's after Sean. If Sean is to fail against Dricus, much like Izzy failed against Dricus, much like Glover failed against Prohaska, that's when Big Brother comes in. Or Little Brother, any way you want to do it. But I'm going to redeem for my boy. He's got a very small circle, and he's got a very strict code with loyalty. I think Strickland losing to du Plessis strengthens any possibility we would have of coming down. And when I tell you the 3 of going up against Tom, who happens to be available, sticking around and seeing if Ankalaev can get through Raychick and then doing the number 1 contender, or going down and redeeming losses of his brothers, I think the least compelling is to stay and defend. And when can you ever say that?
I agree 100%. It's like the competition there is just not like it's just as a fight fan, it is way more interesting if Dricus beats Strickland for him to go and fight, because the story is just amazing. Plus, Dricus is a really, his style is really tough to contend with, and it would really present some issues, I think, for Payton. It would be a really interesting matchup. That's number 1 in my mind. Number 2 would be the Aspinall play. But I ask you, where does he walk at, Payton? I mean, is that just too much to ask of his body and his spirit? I mean, he's probably willing to do it, but could he be competitive against Tom Aspinall?
Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, just Mike, there's nothing by the numbers that he can do here that he's done. He cannot come to a sport that he hasn't done at 34 and be champion. He cannot deal with the crowds that come to these events, all the media that surrounds it, and walk into Madison Square Garden and be anything less than exhausted by the time he gets to the ring from emotion. I mean, come on, he's done it twice now. He can't change weight classes. So there's nobody historically that I could point to. There's no example, including the boxing world, that I could go, well, actually in 1970, we're in a similar spot and this guy went up and no, the bigger guy wins. The younger guy wins. It happens that way every time. I cannot guarantee you that the younger, bigger guy in Tom would win. There's something special about Alex, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But I don't know that Tom has the skills to just go out and take him down, so we might have to take that off of the board. I think Alex would have a really hard time getting up because of the size, but to get him there, Tom's probably going to want to trade, probably have a little bit of ego like everyone else of let me show all of you. And it might work out for him, but it just might be a very dangerous proposition as well. So no, I cannot dismiss the idea of Alex versus Jon Jones is very tough. It seems like you would have to give the benefit of the doubt to Jon. It seems like when you're talking about the greatest ever, regardless of the records that Alex has set in his short time, you still got to show grace and respect to what Jon did. The other side of that, if I was to ask you to really tell me the truth, do you believe that Jon Jones could get Khalil Rountree out of there with strikes in a TKO inside of 20 minutes? You maybe. If I said, do you think Jon Jones could get Alex, or rather Yuri Prohaska out of there twice by finish in less than 12 minutes combined? You'd probably say no. If I said, well, do you think he could get Jamal Hill out of there in 4 minutes? You'd probably say no. If I asked you, do you think he could knock out Israel Adesanya on his feet after losing 4 rounds? You'd probably say no. So there is many things that Jon's done that we rightly should recognize, but I think that Alex is also doing a few things that maybe Jon would also have to admit he's impressed with.
I love that this guy has gotten you, and specifically I think the world at large, or at least the MMA community, to a place where, and I think it's a great place to be as any fighter, which is you just can't count him out ever. That idea that you cannot see in your mind any possibility of this guy really losing in any real devastating fashion, it just speaks to the hard work and the work that this guy's done over such a short period of time. You stop doubting them, right? It happened with Conor after Aldo. You know, he was throwing the shoulder thing up at Cowboy. He was just like in that place of just, he was on a winning streak. The world, his work ethic, the universe at large, and Shama is on his side. And it's really hard to just see him lose, even against a monster like Aspinall, who's young, fast, big, strong. But I'm with you. I would not sit there and go, Aspinall wrecks him. It's done. So, wow. I mean, this is rarefied air that we are in with this guy.
To go all the way back to Royce Gracie, before you could count him out against somebody, you start to be aware he knows things that other people don't. He knows something called an arm bar, and there's something there called a triangle choke, and you do it with your legs. But it was confusing. And then there's a guy that came along, and he had some surprises too. His name was Oleg Taktarov.
I remember.
And he would roll, and he would attack your legs with something called a knee bar, and he could make you tap out but below the waist. So we just hadn't seen it before. And then you get to Conor McGregor, that's lightning fast in a southpaw. Then you get to Jon Jones. He's got this national champion in wrestling, but he's just as dangerous with the elbows. And they offer something you haven't seen. That's another thing that Alex does not have. He stands on his feet. We had Kayla Harrison fight the same night. You have an Olympic judo champion twice over that buys in like everybody too. Okay, I've got to show this. I got to show I've been working on this in the gym. I have to, because this is not just judo. This is, okay, great. But if you take that same thing with Alex, who came as a kickboxer, he did not go out there to show the world his armbar or his double leg takedown. He went out to show the world what I have and what I came here with works if it's applied correctly. And I just share for you, he's not spinning around. He's not reaching for legs and coming back, Mr. Creative like John. He's coming, he's right here. He's walking you down. To your point, he's going to pull out of the way, make sure you don't hit me. I do hit you. That's 101. Every now and then he's going to put a kick in there. It's going to come back. There's nothing that we don't know. And the same could be true if you remember Mike Tyson. We all knew about the uppercut followed by a hook, but my God, you dwell on it. You think about it. It was like you brought it to fruition for yourself. You still couldn't stop it. And I've just seen so many Mike Tyson-esque similarities to the mystique that is becoming Alex Pereira. And when you hear these stories like Goddard told, when you see the face of Rountree, in addition to all the opponents that have fallen over, we're not going to see him fight very many more times. These guys are going to fold in the back. They're human beings. History said they are going to fold in the back. I say, hey, great job to Khalil for not. And Khalil might be one of the last. I also think that the Rachik Ankalaev, but the rest of the guys on the route are just human beings. But they're going to see that, and they're going to think, how do I get back to my family safely?
Yeah. And you know, it's funny. I love that thing that you brought about Tyson. It's like, and he does, Payton does the same thing, which is he surprises you by not surprising you, right? Like he surprises you by doing exactly what he does and sticking with it. He has a plan. He has a style. And is it me? But like the hands are low, right? I mean, they're low, but I guess that works for him because it's not traditional and it's not coming from where you can see them more. He's just nothing makes sense and everything makes sense. But I ask, as a fighter, as a fight analyst, how do you beat him? And without wrestling, let's take that off the table. We know a Daniel Cormier style wrestler is going to go in there, pressure him, put him on his ass and all that. But how do you beat Payton right now? Someone is going to fight him, be it Ankalaev or anybody else. They say to you, Chael, what do I need to do? What do you tell him?
Generally, when you have a guy that's really good, and to go back ad nauseum to bring Mike Tyson back in, but when Mike had this rare power, he had a mystique, he was ferocious, he was scary. He's the one that hit harder, and it sounded different than anybody else. So if I can keep going back to that, generally, a guy is going to be one of two things to become champion. Better than everybody else or tougher than everybody else. And to define toughness, it's largely cardio-based. If you can push for more minutes, if you can just stay out there longer at a high volume, That's really what toughness comes down to. It looks different. Sometimes we'll call it heart or something like this, or boy, he's got a chin on him. But we're really just talking about cardio. And I bring that to you, Soch, because Pierre's got this power and Pierre's got this ruthless skill set, but he's the one winning in the later rounds. He was behind against Adesanya 4-1. Generally, a guy will fold. And so when you ask me, how do you beat him? History says, stay on him. Take those punches, weather the storm like Holyfield did, but don't quit. Stay on him. He lands something, fire back, stay in his face. Don't ever back down. Exactly what Holyfield did. Bring that, the guy that's called a fighter, but he's really just good with aggression. He's good when the punches are going one way. He's not going to be good when they come the other. And Mike, throughout history, that's been true. The guy is either tougher or he's better. If you find out he's better, then make it a tough guy contest. I couldn't tell somebody to go out and out-condition Pereira. I mean, to your point, if I'm not allowed to get him off the feet, dealing with him in the stand-up is a nightmare. And you're not going to make him buckle. His mental toughness, he's not going to wilt. He has not made enough money and had enough fame that it's behind him. You know, they say a rich man can't fight. He is extremely well paid, and all he wants is to get paid again. He is asking to fight more often. He showed up in Salt Lake sick and hurt, both of them. Round of antibiotics, and he had a ligament in his toe and bad ribs. He called the UFC and said, I am going to try to do this. My good faith is that I'm here. I've come out. I've brought my family. You have my good faith promise. I'm going to try. But I need to let you know we have some problems if you want to get someone in backup. And the UFC said, thank you for the communication. We're going to bank on you, but we're not going to bring it back up. If you have to come out, you just let us know, and we'll move the girls. We'll just move that up the card, but the card's going to stay as is. And I just share that because he had everything he needed to get out, and he didn't take it.
2 rounds of antibiotics. He went on antibiotics, had a sore throat, had a body aches, right? And did the round of antibiotics, felt bad still, went back to the doctor, got another round of antibiotics, and he said, I was only going to share this if I won, which I think is just another GOAT move, right? It's just such a cool thing to say, man. It's like, yeah. It just makes you go, oh, I love you. Like, I love you for saying that. And I think your analysis is right. And that's what I was hoping you were going to say, because my untrained mind sees the opponents that went against, the way Mike Tyson went against the taller, bigger guys was he would crowd them, take one, get on the inside and beat up the body. Looking at last night's fight, Khalil, Saturday night's fight, Khalil never was able to get his leverage. Like, he was always reaching. And Pierre, if you took a snapshot of the evening, Chael, most of the photos are going to look like, you know, Poatan doing this and just getting grazed with the punch. So I would think trying to crowd him and get him against the cage, right? And beating up the body and getting those uppercuts, and for Khalil landing that left. Would that be is that at least a good way to go at it?
Yes, it is. And the other side is, you know, if we're going to play that game, which it sounds like a game of, let's get to the judges. Let's gain some favor. I hit you, you don't hit me. Let's make sure we can hold up. I think that's very smart. I think that one thing that Khalil didn't have the option to take it off its feet. It wasn't just a matter that he didn't try and it failed. That's not really what he's equipped with. That's not how he got to this spot any more than Pereira. So when you're doing that, I do believe if Khalil could go back, instead of staying in there and constantly trying to put the big guy down, put him down, I think one thing that he learned was about that toughness, was about that ability to absorb a shot and the discipline to stay in there. And which, again, were really fancy words for conditioning. I think maybe it would be more of I'm going to touch you and then I'm going to move a little bit. I'm going to move, I'm going to eat up a little clock, and then we're going to try this again. And if I succeed, I'm going to move. I'm going to get some breaths in there. And Khalil never did that. He really fought like a gangster himself. I mean, Khalil stood his ground. And the few times in the first rounds that Alex did get something going and succeeded, Khalil was very disciplined to answer back. Most guys would move, they'd recover, they'd come back in. He was disciplined, plant, boom, 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 fire back. And it was working. But it then drained his battery. There was just no energy left for the next 7 minutes of the match.
Yeah, and like you said, he's hitting him, and he's getting that Shama face, which like didn't even touch me. And it just all worked together. You brought up a rib situation with Poatan. This is what happened with with Kevin Holland in the fight. Popped a rib, I believe. I don't know if that's the technical thing that happened, but I'm curious. I'm sure it's happened to you in your career. What everybody's talking about, Dana said, yeah, it's just horrible. How bad is it? It's like, we know a liver kick is going to put you down. It's going to take a second, right? The old Boss Rutan red boot, to your liver takes a second. What does that do? Are you just unable to fight through it? How bad was Kevin Holland?
Great memory with Boss. We were talking about Matt and Rampage earlier. Boss was on that card. Boss said it was going to fight Chemo. He ended up fighting Warpath.
Oh, I remember.
I just love the reference. I love the Boss reference. That guy is such a character. In addition to being a pioneer in our sport, I will tell you, the ribs for me has been the worst pain that I've ever felt. But when I speak to people that have had it done, they say the same thing. Randy Couture had to miss competition. See, something happened in a bar. A girl was attacked, which meant that guy's now going to have to deal with Randy. Well, it turned out that guy had 3 friends. That wasn't enough. They should have had more. But the guy got to a car. So now it's Randy versus the guy in the car, a fight that Randy accepted. So now Randy is holding on to the windshield of a car that is moving and can't see through Randy's body and wrecks into a phone pole, which throws Randy into it, and he gets hustled out. Rib goes through his lung, and he should have died. As anybody that rides on the hood of a car that wrecks into a phone pole should do.
Sure.
I share that whole story because everything that could be wrong was wrong. And the only part he talks about is the ribs. Oh my goodness, my ribs. And I've just shared that same one. There's a couple of things you could do. Break a rib, but you could also just break or tear the cartilage around a rib. That's all that I did. But my God, Mike, it hurt so bad. And when I was at the doctor, it hurt more at the doctor's because here's what he told me. He was explaining to me that you've got this cartilage and that's what keeps the rib in place. And it's going to continue to hurt until those nerve ends rub on each other and die. Once they die, the pain will go away. But there was something about him saying that. Like right there. It's just, I was like, oh God, they got to rub on each other until they die. And he's like, it could take up to 8 months. And it did. I will tell you, it happened in the Pac-10 finals for me, but we had the Nationals 2 weeks later. And I will tell you, I tried, but it hurt real bad. It really hurts bad with everything. Just taking a breath of air, that's where your ribs come in. And yes, when Kevin Holland went and told his coaches, I hurt my rib, I actually grimaced where I was. I grimaced because I was having flashbacks. And yeah, man, I've got to defend him. He would have gone on. By the way, the coach made absolutely the right decision because you are not coming back from that.
No. It was a wince situation. I got to tell you that when you think of the worst pain you've ever had, right, you'll remember it very clearly. It's like Randy, speaking of Randy, he had told me that story actually about the bar situation and the accident. And then if you remember, when Randy had a heart attack, essentially, this was a few years ago. And the big story was that he had a heart attack and he walked himself to the hospital or whatever.
Yep.
Because he's so tough, obviously. But I remember him telling me the story and him saying when it happened, he goes, I thought I had popped a rib. He said it was just that painful. So looking back, yeah, every time somebody talks about this pop rib situation, it's extreme. For me, the worst pain I've ever felt, 2 things. Okay. One of them is normal and the other one is insane. Okay. So we'll start with the normal one. I had a kidney stone. Bro. For 12 hours in the emergency room, I repeated the sentence, I'm dying. I'm just dying, baby. You don't understand. I'm dying. To my wife, I'm dying. I'm really going to die. I need you to understand that I'm dying and you need to take care of the dogs.
Yes,
I was convinced that I was dying. There's no other, it just messes with you to the point the pain is so bad that you really think there's no way my body can survive this. That was the normal one. The abnormal one was Fresh Prince 1995, I believe. And we were shooting at the Playboy Mansion.
Tough life you got there, Soch. That's a tough life, my friend.
That's a real tough one. I'm like, and now the writers aren't supposed to be on set when you're on location. And Will said, well, we're going to need at least a couple of writers there. And I'm like, choose me, choose me, choose me, choose me, choose me. And he picked one of the female writers, which was a very smart decision because Will's smart like that. And then he said, all right, and Soch. And I go, yeah, I mean, I'll go. If you want me to go, I'll go. And somebody's got to do it.
Sure, you got to help out.
Of course. I got to be there. So the morning comes, Chael, where we're about to go to the Playboy Mansion. And I'm in the shower and I'm so excited. Now, you got to remember, Chael, these days, we got internet and there's stuff available everywhere. Back then, you had Playboy magazine. You know what I mean? There wasn't too much. I mean, internet was there, but it was sort of like still crawling phase. And Playboy was a big thing. And the mansion, the lore of the Playboy Mansion was massive.
Oh, I could only imagine.
I'm going to see the grotto. Hef is in the show. He had a role. So excited. I got so excited that I put Neutrogena liquid soap on a thing, put it on my face. And I was just so excited. I opened my eyes to do something. Bro, it's the worst pain I've ever felt. That is this close to the passing the kidney stone.
Really?
Yes. It was this orange colored liquid face wash by Neutrogena. And it was holy hell, to the point where I said, I'm not going to the mansion. Okay. But I toughed it out, Chael. That's a warrior.
That is a warrior. Can we go back to, so when this Neutrogena is in your, I know the product is why I'm at.
Yeah.
When it's in your eye, could you just rinse it out with water and it goes away? Like it was a pain, but it was a quick pain. Or did it stay with you?
Nope. Super intense. Washing it out, putting water all the way in and open my eye and throwing it in there. It started to dissipate, but it didn't go away fully. Like I came out of the shower, my eye it looked inhuman. It was beet red, and I just couldn't get it right.
No, that sounds terrible. That sounds terrible and very painful, by the way.
Crazy, but that was the most pain I've ever felt. And that Kevin Holland situation, with the minute he went down, I didn't know what happened, but I knew he was in serious pain. And you could tell by the way he was talking to his cornermen that he was basically saying, I cannot go on, but he wouldn't have said it himself. So I'm glad that they kind of threw in the towel on that one and stopped the fight. Very smart for the coaches.
This might surprise you, by the way, but just being there, being in the crowd and hearing all of the responses, two of the loudest pops of the night, and we had world titles in line, two of the loudest pops, not number 1 and 2, but right up there, is when Buckley had called out Kamaru Usman. The crowd just really thought that was a great idea. And the second is when Kevin Holland made his walk. That crowd respected and loved him. And Kevin Holland had been in Salt Lake, and I thought he had lost. I thought he lost last year when we did, just to remind you, that was Poirier versus Gaethje for the BMF title. That's the last time they were in Salt Lake. They loved him. Holland is not ranked. He was taking on a top guy. He's not even fully an 85-pounder. I mean, it was a pretty tough night out to start with. They loved him. And I'm just sharing, like, he's got something. This whole I will fight anyone and you bring on the weight and no excuses business, it really works. And there's only room for like one of those guys at a time. But Cowboy Cerrone stepped aside. That guy is now Kevin Holland.
And he does it with flair, right? He does it with personality. He's great at mixing it up at a press conference. He's got a mouth on him. He's clever. And he's the underdog in the way that he's so he's thin. And he's fighting guys like Dolidze is just like he's out there hiking and he's just this monster with the hairy back and all that. And like, you just look at Kevin Holland as a guy that's you look and you go, if I was a UFC fighter, I wouldn't be that awesome. I'd kind of be like Kevin Holland, good for you. And you want to see him win.
What's that got to do with it? What do you mean he's got a hairy back? What is that? What's that got to do with anything? I mean, is that intimidating? Do you see that and go, hey man, that's a real man there?
He looks like a bear, bro. He's just like, I go out and I hike and I go to mountain and I have back hair. I am strong. Like, he's just got a way about him. He's not like, he's friendly, but he looks like he's just an intimidating opponent. And if you look at Kevin Holland, he's just the least intimidating human being on earth. He's like, hey, what's up? And I'm at the TED press conference and Like, he's got a mouth, but he's not scary. And he's always fighting scary looking guys. And I think the average fan who doesn't know a lot about UFC watches guys like Kevin Holland and they identify with him because they're looking at, in the biggest example, it would have been Brock Lesnar back in the day when Randy Couture fought Brock Lesnar. right? It's like we thought Randy was bad, and then this guy walks in the traps and the whole thing. It's just it's a human, like, I don't know. It's just something that we want to see guys like Kevin Holland win because maybe he's not supposed to, and maybe that represents us in some way.
I'm not over the back hair yet. I'm not over it because I think I get it. I just can't finish the thought. Like, maybe it's a sign of like a higher testosterone. And I'm wondering if a guy could work it in. Like, if he's at a press conference and he's like, he's giving all the reasons I can beat you. You know, he's reading his resume and and he's just slipped in the back hair, more back hair than you. I know this is clumsy, but there's something here to the back hair business, much like the braided business. You know that got a reaction from Paddy the Baddy?
No.
Paddy the Baddy responded to you saying never
You're
braid your hair. Nope, and he had a reason for it though, because he actually, he knew what your point was, but he had a reason, and he's going to continue to braid his hair. Yes, he is, but he did respond.
Good for you, Paddy the Baddy.
And was polite, by the way.
Look at that, right? Hey, you know what, Paddy the Baddy. By the way, I just saw a thing on him that how much weight he gains when he's not training. Have you seen these videos of him recently? He's a big boy. He really...
You can only do that so many times. That yo-yo can only go so many times. Paddy, though, the immature, big mouth, turned out to not totally be true. He's 31 years old. He's married and a father of 2. I mean, he's just not who people thought he was. He is good with a quip. He is not afraid to come at a guy, but he's a real sportsman, and he'll make that walk, and he's got goals and dreams. I mean, Paddy the Baddy turned out not quite to be what we thought, and I've seen nothing yet that disqualifies the belief that he could be world champion.
He started off as, I'm going to blow the roof off the gad, and I'll kill everybody. And he's just got this thing, and we're like, okay, It's kind of Conor-like, and I don't know if I like this guy. And anytime you try to, he just happens to have an accent, right? He's from Liverpool, I think. And it's like, so it's similar to Conor. So we as people go, oh, yeah, he's trying to be Conor. Screw him, he's not Conor. And that was sort of my reaction in the beginning. I wasn't sure how much I liked him. But to your point, as he continues to fight and as he continues to show who he is as a family man, as a friend to, I'm going to forget her name. I'm so bad with names. But his partner there who's
Molly
McCann, exactly, who's just amazing as well. But you see the friendship factor. When you can see somebody be that good of a friend and a support system, you go, all right. And I agree. I think it's great. And I think it's working for him. And I think people love him. And I'm really curious where his career is going to go. So he's super young. He's got a lot of time left. What did you say? He's 31?
Yeah, you said back hair. You said he's scared because he has back hair. That's so funny. Oh, I don't know what to do with that. But we're right there, man. We're right on top of something with the back hair thing. It's this. And you want to know who's going to really like is Dolidze. Like, he was up in the woods and he cooked a steak on a rock, and that for marketing was a huge deal.
Oh, I saw
Megan Olivia had done a whole piece for ESPN about the steak from a rock.
Back hair.
The back hair. They can't overlook the back hair. And we're close. It's clumsy. I admit it's not. There's something to this back hair business.
We're going to figure it out. Let me tell you, buddy, you can cook all the steaks you want, but it's like, and that's all awesome, but just watch him approach the referee at the face-off in the cage and the shoulder shot. It's intimidating. He's going to use it to his advantage. And also, he doesn't go, I don't shave it. I am who I am, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a rug. I got rugs on both sides, and I'm here to kill you. I'm going to do it with a smile, and I'm a nice guy. But also, I'm very antisocial, and I'm out there in the woods. He looked like one of those elk. What are those things called that, they climb the mountain sideways? Right?
Yeah. Well, is it called a mountain goat?
Yeah, mountain goat. He's got mountain goat like energy. Like he's just out there. And imagine the poor cameraman that had to follow him.
Yep.
He's out there, man. He's a real and a really tough guy. I think I like Roman. Plus, I don't want him to kill me for the back here situation.
No, he's a handful. And he's gone to 205 and 85. He's a legitimate handful that he should be getting looked at like for a Bo Nickel, Paul Craig winner. Yes,
that fight's going to be great.
I agree with you.
Let me ask you a question. Kayla Harrison.
Yep.
Last night, she did a bit of an emotional interview with Megan O'Leary, where I think the reality, the buzz of the fight is over and she's backstage, and she just felt like she had maybe perhaps, and I don't necessarily agree, I'm just asking you, maybe have disappointed her team in her performance. And she said, people count on me and I don't feel like I showed up tonight. And she started saying things like, I just wasn't feeling it. It wasn't my time, to paraphrase. What was your opinion? Because I do think before this, Kayla Harrison was the boogie woman, right? I may think her physical appearance is very arresting. And I think she's also she has a great mouth. She's great at a press conference. And I think we just saw her as this, Amanda Nunes lioness who's going to come in and tear everything apart. And I didn't see it last night. What was your take?
It's very interesting. First off, the UFC is different. And Dana White has grace. He is not looking to punish her or take something or you fail this, and he doesn't do that to Bo Nickel or anybody else. They find out the hard way sometimes. It's different over here. Like, this truly is some very elite, and not just the competition, but the environment. The environment is difficult to compete in. It pulls some people down with nerves and pressure. You'll hear about that. But it also elevates some people to fight better, where it's not just a battle of skill versus skill. There's other things. That's what UFC does to you. It's other things that can affect you. Now, when you have somebody invincible, boogie woman type, it takes a village to raise a child. They'll say, well, it kind of takes a village to beat that person. But hear me out. The first step is having somebody that can make it a little tighter than you thought. And then you get somebody else to come along because they saw that, and all of a sudden maybe they win a round. And then you get somebody that wins a round and a half, but they win this position 2 or 3 times. And then you get the person that sits back, that's finally going to come in, that's going to come in and pull the big upset and get all the credit. But the truth is they had about 4 to 5 people help them to get their kind of 4-minute mile type attitude. And I share that because that is what happened to Kayla. Watching that fight and then saying, well, how would she do with Amanda? Or how would she do with Pena, or the winner of Pennington right at the time she fought? And you start to see where in 5 rounds, she could lose a couple of them, or she could lose a couple of positions, or maybe it's not a foregone conclusion that maybe she could beat one of those girls, but maybe she couldn't beat all 3 girls. And when we got here this evening, we thought she could beat all 3 girls in the same night. So, it just kind of, I think it does take a little of the allure. When I was wrestling, my dad would be very upset with me sometimes if I would win a match, and he'd be happy with outcomes, but if he thought I could win by more, and he would tell me, and I never understood. I was 11 years old, I was 13 years old, I didn't understand why he couldn't just tell me, good job. He would say, because you let him know he can do this. You let him know he can compete. The next time you wrestle, he's not going to beat you, but if you keep letting him get closer, then eventually he does. And with time went by and I matured and I grew up and I could see and experience things, my father was right. My father was very right. You start letting that guy, you're 10 points better, but you let him be 7 points better. Well, now he's 5 points better, and now he's 2 points. And it's one of those things where you really got to beat him as badly as you can. Other people are watching. And I think that Kayla did that. I think the UFC is harder, but I think that she did open a little potential to some people to say, no, you're a human being after all.
Chael, that's really great because we've spoken a little bit about this, how no matter how great you are, be it Anderson Silva, right? With you fighting Anderson, figuring out the puzzle, everybody's solvable. I think time is not your friend when you're a UFC champ, especially when you're a dominating champ. Because eventually, unless you're Khabib maybe, right? People are just going to take points. Like, okay, we got that one little thing that a John Wood is going to see, right? Or some great coach is going to notice. And it's just check, check, check. And over time, with enough fight tape, everybody gets figured out. And I do think that Kayla was in a lesser organization for a long time, and her physical appearance makes you think she's, all that. I don't know where she's going to go next. But I definitely think everybody in the division last night, when people say, oh, they put the division on notice, right? Like, Ilia Topuria in the stands watching Max versus Gaethje, right? It was that's something. I think the opposite happened last night. And I think that all of the opponents, every woman in that division went, oh, okay, they're going to want a piece of her. It's like you're a little bit of a wounded animal almost, and they want in. So I think it's up to Kayla to surprise people in her next fight and show up different. And why did it never happen to somebody like Khabib, though? Why is it that no matter what he did, nobody could figure out that puzzle, Chael? Is he just because he's so good? Is it mindset? Is it that Dagestani work ethic? Why did nobody ever figure him out?
He actually did. He did actually have an intangible and let me bring Jon Jones into this. If you're going to make believe that somebody can beat Jon Jones, the first thing that you're going to have to be convinced of is that they can stop Jon's takedown. If Jon gets you down, he's so long, when you get up from Jon, and you might get up, but you will be different. And if he gets you down twice, you're going to be a lot different. So if you could believe, and I think that's one thing that makes Stipe interesting, Stipe with that wrestling background, the fact that Stipe could stop Daniel from taking him down, maybe Stipe can stop Jon, and just that would get us a little closer to the idea that somebody could compete. Now, when it comes to Stipe, or I apologize, Khabib, the great intangible wasn't just the takedown or the leg entanglement when you got there. It was the pace. That son of a gun would be on you in ways that you've never experienced. I mean, Dustin Poirier, who is as good and as tough as any man that's ever been born, told his corner in the middle of that fight, he won't stay off me. If he'll just give me this much space so I can try to do something. I can't. He's telling his corner. He's telling Mike Grant. I mean, the whole world's hearing him say it, right? He said, he's not even. I can't try. I can't even try to do something because he's glued to me. And I mean, that was really the thing. The techniques and the entanglements, and Khabib never did anything we hadn't seen before. But boy, he would do it at such a pace, such a nonstop pace, that it just never came down to skill. That was the intangible. It really was. Special guy. God, he was special, Khabib.
God, my God. You see it more than ever maybe in the Conor fight. You know, Conor's face. He was just, when he kept, Khabib was like locking his legs and like trapping the legs. How annoying is that, by the way, where you just physically can't get anything going no matter how strong your core is. And you saw it on Conor's face. Earlier, you brought up the judges in the 307 fight. There was some, let's call it, like controversial decisions. What did you think of the Aldo situation?
I am quick to pile on when somebody won't respond. It bothers me. We have a government agency funded by taxpayers. I feel that they should have to talk to us, but the belief, no, stay out of it and don't speak. I admit that makes good sense. I'm just saying that I kind of like to pile on to get them to break their own code. And that's not what the litmus test is. The litmus test is, did they call it right? Did they do a good job? Were they honest and fair? Yeah, I think that they were all those things. I think we had some weird coincidences that night. I think that there was a few things that happened that surprised us, but they weren't completely egregious. And Aldo was one of them. Like, that opponent did such a good job, but Aldo has something still left that we all assumed would be gone. We thought the speed would be gone. The timing would be gone. They love to say that your power is the last thing to go. First off, I don't even know if that's true. But secondly, the first thing to go is your output and your timing and your speed. It's your ability to get out of the way. Aldo has all of these things, as good as when he was champion. So I think that we were so impressed with that. Maybe we wanted it for Aldo a little more than Aldo actually had. And just in fairness, I watched this with Charlie and Ian Parker. Ian had Aldo, and he was defiant. He was angry that Charlie and I did it, and he was defiant. And Charlie and I were both like, Ian, they're going to give it to the other guy. So then when they did do it, I was amongst the people that said, oh, this is foul ball. But the truth was, I also had given it to the other guy.
Yeah, I think we romanticize with Jose Aldo. I think people generally just want to see him win because he's just such a good guy. He was such a great champion. You just like him. He's just a very likable person. I thought it was really, really, really close, and it could have gone either way. I was not up in arms about that. One that I was up in arms about was the fact that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was winning the fight. He was winning that fight. And sure, Buckley just played it really smart, caught him, and was another loss. I picked Wonderboy on this show, right? Yeah, that was another rough night because I think Wonderboy showed up at his age too. I think he's 41, right? It's impressive.
He's for sure 40. It's for sure 40. Yeah, whether he had that birthday or not, I agree, man. He was one of the performances of the night. It was Wonderboy, the loser, the one who lost. He was so hard to take down.
Yes.
And he has never done a better job of getting up once he is down. I mean, he did better in this fight than he did back in what some people call his prime against Tyron Woodley. He was impossible. I was so impressed. I was so impressed of how he found that fence, knew where he was, where they would create a little distance, pop right up to his feet. He was fighting perfect. And he had all that taken from him. I mean, that's the sport. That's the game. His opponent also did a really good job, but that should not have been an undercard fight. And I only bring that up. Whatever happened between the organization and Wonder Boy, we got to agree that we call it even now. We've got to agree because that is right. He's only got so many left, if any. It's you're at that point of your career. But the last thing that we need to do as a community is disrespect Wonder Boy. That is something special. And by the way, he fought in a special way. He really did do some things very well.
Yes. He's a stud and he's a nice guy, obviously.
You've met him?
I've met him quite a few times because of Weidman. You know, they're married to sisters, I believe, and I think they still are. And so during the Kevin Can Wait era, 2016, he was around quite a bit. And it was fun because I actually got to spar Weidman. And I even moved around with Wonder Boy, which was a thrill. But he's as nice, if not nicer in person. And I just root for him. He's just one of those guys I just want to see win. Maybe I romanticized in my own mind when I picked him. But if you go back and you look at the tape of us talking, I was pontificating why, okay, why he was going to win and why Kevin Holland was going to win. Oh, I had a science, Chael. It was like, the bigger cage and the altitude and he's going to stay away. Nope. Wrong.
And so one thing that maybe you know if you know him, but he's had Jack Black in his corner a couple of times. There was no Jack Black. Is there any story to that? There was no Jack Black.
There's no Jack Black. It's, I wonder if he tweeted or X'd or whatever his support, but it is funny how a lot of people are, and I'm not saying that Jack Black is this guy, but when you're in your prime and everybody's loving you, people around, you get a little older, maybe, I don't know, why wasn't he there? But they were buddies. They were doing videos together. And yeah, I don't know. I'm going to look into that though. I want to figure out what happened there because they were really close.
Yeah. All right.
So I wanted to bring something up because it made me laugh and I want to read it to you. We talk about trash talk, right? I'm sitting here with one of the best. Payton Talbott. You familiar with his personality and everything?
Yes.
What a unique guy this dude is. Now, he goes under the banner for me. And on this show, I've said there's been people in the past that I looked at in the beginning of the career and I go, how can anybody beat them? Right? And I said Dominic Reyes. I was wrong. I was mixing him up with Johnny Walker. It was Johnny Walker. When Johnny Walker first started and he was a 205er who could do a backflip, he was so strong and so athletic. And we ended up seeing that Johnny Walker was beatable. But this is how I feel about Payton Talbott, where I'm just like, wow, this kid is really something and really special. And then I started to see his personality blossom. And I don't know if you saw this, but he was in a podcast, I want to say with Nina Drama. And she asked him, give me the first word that comes up when you hear these names. And he's sitting there eating fruit and they go, Sugar Sean O'Malley. And he goes, pretty boy. Marab. And he goes, dumb. He said, dumb as a box of rocks. Okay? He said, dumb as a box of rocks. Corey Sandhagen. He thought for a second and said, salad fingers. I don't know what that means. It's not a compliment. Okay? It's not a compliment. Piotr Jan. He said, Hezbollah. Okay. The little guy, Hezbollah.
Yeah.
Henry Cejudo, he said cringe. And the last one, which I'm just not a fan of because we both love this guy.
Accurate.
Jose Aldo, and he said, Mr. Potato Head.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Oh, my goodness.
What is this technique? Is this just a guy who doesn't care? Is this a guy that's picking a fight? I don't know, but he's unique and special, and I cannot wait to see this guy's career keep going because he's a unique one.
I mean, I like back hair. Back hair still wins the day, but salad fingers, because I don't know what it means. What? I don't know. Is that slippery? Is each finger's different? Because maybe you get a carrot and a tomato and a cucumber. I don't even know. Yeah. I'm going to look into that, by the way. Mr. Potato Head actually works. That one he actually nailed. I somehow can also, somewhat, the way he does the beard. Okay, that's interesting. Yes, there's nothing about calling Marab dumb as a box of rocks that's clever or creative, but there is something from a surprise factor of calling the baddest dude on earth
Yep.
that name or any insult that works. Yeah, no, Payton, that's a home run. That's not the world's best material, but I think the delivery and the spontaneity surprised us. Listen, that's an A+ for me. He gets an A+.
Dana White had some words for the PFL, which I loved. They asked him about PFL, and the PFL said, "We're going to spend more money than the UFC did at the Sphere."
Yes.
And he goes, "Okay, stupid, right? How many seats are you going to sell? Spending more money is not a win." Is this personal? I mean, look, it seems like anybody that gets in Dana's way, he's going to go at whether it's in the boxing world and whatever. But this is personal from Francis, right? Wouldn't you say this must have a lot to do with losing Francis to that organization?
Don Davis is the one that had made those statements, and he is just so by the book of business. This guy could be a professor at any college in the country. I mean, he is so well read and well established. And when you ask, is it personal? Dana wants it to be, but it's not. It's not yet. He wants it though. Dana wants a foe so badly. He is not retired. You get all these fighters that retire. He is not retired, okay? He just doesn't have a bout agreement yet. He is chomping at the bit. He'll fight anybody in any way they want to do it, man. If the NFL wants to come over and get the boss's wheelhouse, believe me, he will take on Goodell and the rest of them. You just got to throw the first punch. He is dying for this, but no, they don't have the bout agreement yet. He wants more so that he can come out. He's well armed. He's bringing his troops together. He's ready to fire, but he's not sensing the threat just yet. But boy, he's praying for war. And I mean, I'll just tell you, like, we respect our military so much, but we don't interview them a lot. And one of the reasons we don't interview them, if you talk to a Marine, the Marines pray for war. So the whole country's like, okay, we want peace and peace treaties. Let's all let cooler heads and diplomacy. You talk to an actual soldier, please God in heaven above, somebody fire a shot our way. And I'm only telling you that, like, you got to have that mindset, but you also got to protect it sometimes. And yeah, Dana wants this fight. He wants the fight badly, but he makes a fair point, which the spending side of it is not the part where you get out there. But you also saw on Don Davis's point. He's letting the world know something special's coming. I have a special plan. I'm going to reveal it to you as we go. And today's clue is we're not sparing this expense. We're going all in. And I think that at the end, I think Don's message was right. I think that he did that right. He's got you and I talking about it. He got Dana to respond to it. Listen, I'd like for the PFL to be that rival that Dana wants. I liked some of those battles that Dana and Scott Coker would have, just by example. There's a great one back in the day. Calvin Ayre, Bodog. He had a gambling website, and he ended up getting into MMA just to market the gambling. And Dana wanted that fight so bad. What killed him, and I was working for Calvin at the time, so I know this firsthand. What killed him, Dana, is Calvin loved the UFC. He would get us together for Bodog fights, and then he'd order the UFC so we could all watch that before we did Bodog. And it just like took the wind out of Dana's sails. But yeah, man, Dana wants an opponent badly.
What a great tactic, right? You're about to get into a fight with somebody and you say, look, bro, you seem like a really cool guy, or whatever. And then you're like, yeah, I can't fight this guy. He likes me, right? He complimented me. It's amazing. What a tactic. It's like being a UFC fan where if you look at somebody like Oscar De La Hoya, which was also another big brawl that Dana's gone down, Oscar was the opposite. Oscar was talking smack and it was fueling Dana and it was fantastic. And Dana was like, I will go low. I will do whatever it takes. I love watching a good Dana White fight.
There was a story. I'm trying to give you a message without saying certain words. So let me see how I'm going to do this dance. The PFL got an influx of money.
Yes, Saudi.
They were surprised, yes, when they got it, and who exactly. Okay, hold that thought. I'm not going to say anymore. There is a story that's well known. There was a company known as Microsoft that ruled the world, and there was a dying company known as Apple. One was owned by Gates and one was led by Steve Jobs. And Gates, and this is back in the 90s when this was a really big deal, but gave $8 billion with a B. Gates, the leader of Microsoft that wants Apple out of business, Gates gave Apple $8 billion to flourish because Gates believed, knowing himself, as long as you stay there, I will fight harder, and he's the one that kept them around. He actually ended up losing the fight because of the very donation that he gave but I'm just sharing for you. When I tell you Dana wants a fight, he wants a fight. Believe me when I tell you that.
Yep. I don't know. The PFL, to me, and I love, Randy Couture's a mutual friend, and, we love that he's involved in that organization. I've just never been interested in the format of it all. But I have to say, recently, they've been coming up. They made a promo video for the next Francis fight, the Battle of the Giants. Dude, they put some real money and real production value into it. I don't know. Maybe they'll be a player. Is the goal, do you think, for the UFC to buy them? And moreover, speaking of UFC having to spend money, I needed to ask you this today because I've been looking at it and I don't know the ins and outs, and maybe you can't speak on it too much, but what is going on with the antitrust lawsuit? Did they lose? Are they paying these fighters? Is it Kung Lee in that whole group?
There was two different, I'm trying to think of how to say it relatively simply, but there was two lawsuits.
Okay.
And they had found a way to combine those lawsuits.
Okay.
And they had reached an agreement. Now, what does that mean? That means, let's call them the prosecution that's coming after the UFC, then the UFC being the defendant. Mm-hmm. The prosecution, the offense here, agreed with the UFC. We've come to terms. Let's go before the judge and let them know we all put our swords down and we walk away here. So they go do that. And that is just a formality, and a gavel comes down and off you go with the paperwork. The judge said no. Judge said no deal. He said, I know that you think this is fair and I know that you want to do it. I don't think it is fair. And one of the judge's problems, he had several, but one of them is he didn't like that the two lawsuits were combined. So he wanted them separated, and now you guys can come to an agreement. And the judge also had mentioned that he thought it should be 3 times what they had agreed on. Well, 3 times takes you to $1 billion, which is just simply silly, aside from outrageous.
Yeah.
It is so outrageous, it's silly. But this is what he said. So what they have done is they kind of met it part way. They did, in fact, separate the lawsuits. They have now, on the Lee one, the Kung Lee, they have now come to terms, and they would like to go back before the judge and have the gavel come down. If that happens, we can then have whatever conversation needs to be had about this second one. But to my understanding, and unless it happened earlier today, I'm up to speed, that gavel has not come down. Everything's agreed to the point that fighters even know what they're making. This law firm that is handling that, I must tell you, in their defense, is very accessible. Okay. They are very professional and organized. And they are communicating with fighters. They're collecting addresses and letting you know your percentage according to the calculator should this gavel come down. But to my understanding, there's no checks being cut because there's no money in because there is no official end. It is not officially over.
Could it go the way of them, the UFC, not having to pay, or has that decision been made?
No, absolutely it could.
It could?
Yes. All they would have to call for is a trial. As long as the UFC comes to terms and they work it out, they go before the judge, and then the judge is the formality. And I understand it's the biggest formality, but it always comes down. Our legal system is simply too jammed up for everything to go to trial.
Yeah.
Our legal system comes to a screeching halt if everybody goes to trial. It is based upon deal making. That's the only thing that gets the speed through. So the gavel always comes down, but it didn't. And the judge said no. And stated kind of loosely what he would like to see, but he'd like to see some stuff with trade, some lesser things in contract, a separation of the two cases, and triple the amount. I mean, he said it all kind of quickly. I think they've come to a very reasonable I don't think there's anything reasonable about it. I believe that UFC got turned upside down, shaken till every quarter fell out. I think it is beyond outrageous what's happening, but I think that the judge has to say if the UFC thinks it's fair to take this kind of an ass whipping, I think he needs to bring the gavel down, and I think he will. But to your question specifically, I do not believe he has, not yet.
Wow.
That's just a matter of getting the court date.
Yeah, if you're Kung Lee or one of these guys, the life-changing money hanging in the balance, and you think it's coming, and then all of a sudden, wait a second, hold on. Boy, that's got to be stressful. And who is the second party? Is it another fighter that's leading that group?
Much like Lee versus Zuffa, it's a name. And I don't believe that it was even done fairly, by the way. I mean, I don't believe that somebody went and sat down with a lawyer and said, here's what happened. I believe lawyers saw this happening and called a guy and said, hey, if you'll put your name on this, I'll do everything. I take 40%, but you get 10. If I go get 500 million, you get a check for 50 million. I don't need anything more than a signature. And I know that I'm changing it, but I don't think that it was above board. I don't think they should go to trial with the UFC. I don't think there's 12 people not smart enough to get out of jury duty in all of Clark County that's going to award some firm from San Francisco over their own local company $1 billion. And it's at that point where the UFC could go to trial and pay nothing. And that's a great risk you take. If you're the judge, if you're against the evil corporation who's doing business in your very town, who employed people during a pandemic, for God's sakes, no appreciation for any of that. No appreciation for all. He could have gone out of business. He should have gone out. He was $40 million in the hole at one point. He comes back. He coined the phrase, fighters are being taken advantage. Fighters are being exploited. He coined the phrase. Now he has somebody suing him for the very phrase that this is so hard to believe. By the way, guess who's getting a check? A big one, by the way. Right here.
Really?
Yeah, and the guys, and they've even said, we don't give Chael his check. Don't, even though legally he's entitled, don't give Chael his check because he's against us. Oh yeah, I'm against you, and I'm taking your money on top of that. And if you hold my money up, I'm coming after you for interest. Believe me, I would love that game.
Wow, bro, I don't know a ton about it. Clearly, you're teaching me and you're educating me, but I will say this, that everybody wants to look at this big, it's always, because every movie we've ever seen ends with the corporation and the lawyers shuffling their papers and, us rooting for the little guy. But I don't think the little guy in this situation, from what I understand, has a real case. You said it best. I think they have a loophole. There was a lawyer that's able to go, wait a second, if we can move this over here and you can say this over there, we have a case for hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think it's really sad because people try to take you down when you're huge. And if this was an evil corporation, if they had just been doing these egregious acts time and time again, I've never seen it. All I see as a fan and as a guy who knows a little bit about this is a dude in Dana White that just constantly wants to make sure that his people are working and that he's putting on the best shows for entertainment for the rest of us. Now it's going to move to boxing and it's slap fighting or whatever. And it's I don't know, it's a little gross, man. Everybody's got their hands in your pockets because you have deep pockets. Sort of how I see it.
All right, I'm going to see you tomorrow or later in the week at least. I'll catch up with you later in the week. So, thank you, pal.